All right, I think the tech people were kindly going to try to find me a clicker, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to warn you, I'm a wanderer, so I kind of roam the stage here. I hope that's not distracting for anybody. My name is Tyree, and I'm the Reentry manager for the Employment Security Department. And what that means is that I've been tasked in Washington State with helping to design a program to bring employment services back into every single Department of Corrections facility. There are 23 Departments of Corrections facilities. If you didn't know, there's 11 prison facilities, and there's 12 reentry centers, which are basically work release centers that are in various communities across the state. And we're going to bring, hey Seth, we're going to bring services back into all of those. Oh, Seth's my clicker. Thanks, Seth. I appreciate it. All right, let's go to the next slide, please.
High tech.
Yeah, I know, very high tech. All right, so I want to start with a quick question. So we'll throw this out to the audience. What do you think is the difference between people with criminal convictions and those without criminal convictions? I'm going to ask you a series of questions to illustrate that. So don't be shy in here. We're all friends. Go ahead, Jose.
I didn't get caught.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah, I didn't get caught. So let's illustrate that a little bit. How many people in here might have at one point in their lives had a little too much to drink and then gotten behind the wheel? How many people in here over the age of 18 might have gotten into a physical altercation with somebody but didn't get, okay? All right. How many people in here before it was legal might have had a little weed in their pocket, smoked a little weed?
My boss is here.
That's right. Right. So the reason why I ask these questions is because really what it comes down to often is kind of what Jose said. Didn't get caught. It's luck and location. So if you are a lower income person or you live in a neighborhood that is over-policed, you are much more likely to come in contact with law enforcement and much more likely to get caught. If you live in a suburb and you have a couple of glasses of wine before you drive back to your nice neighborhood and you get pulled over, you're much more likely to be given a break or to be given to kind of get the benefit of the doubt than folks that live in these other places. And so for many of us, and I know that the folks that are here in this room have compassion and empathy for this population, this reentry population, or JIIs as we call them, Justice Impacted Individuals. That's the language that you're going to start to hear the Employment Security Department use a lot more. But really is luck and location. And I point that out to you just in case you have people who work in your offices, because not everyone is going to be as compassionate as you are. Some people are still going to have a pretty significant stigma when it comes to working with this population. So just something for you to be able to point out to them. Now, I'm going to apologize to Ish because he's heard my favorite icebreaker. And Jose, you might have heard this one too. But I'm going to do my favorite 3 icebreaker questions just to kind of loosen the room up. Okay, first question. You get on a plane, do you recline or not recline? Recline? 2 people, 3 people, not recline. I'm a not recline. Okay, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, all right. Second question. Second question. On a dark desert highway, cool winds in my hair. All right, best decade for music, 70s? Okay, there's a couple 70s peoples. I'm a cowboy on a steel horse I ride. I'm wanted. There we go. All right, 80s, best decade for music. Okay. It's driving me out of my mind. That's why it's hard for me to find. You know the rest. All right, 90s, best decade for music. Okay, I am a solid 80s guy now. I was a 90s guy, but I heard a playlist. All right, here's the last question. I want you to lolook around the room.
Hello, Led Zeppelin.
Thank you. Sorry, 60s? 70s. I call that 70s. All right.
90s Tupac.
I cannot do any Tupac song in here. I like my job too much-ish. All right. Last one. Now look around the room. This is the most important question you're going to hear all day. And this is going to let you know if the person sitting next to you has a dark soul. A truly evil person. Pineapple on pizza, yes? Pineapple on pizza, no. Solid no. All right. Thank you for playing along with that. I recently found out that somebody I'm dating likes pineapple on her pizza, and I'll tell you, I'm going to really miss her. All right, let's go to the next slide, Seth. All right, so here's the agenda for today. I actually thought it was kind of weird when they asked me, a reentry person, to speak at a military event or a veterans event. but I did some research and found out there are some similarities between the military and prison. I'm sure many of you know this, right? I'm going to give a quick executive summary that kind of talks about what we're going to do. I'm going to give you just a little bit of my story today, and then we're going to talk about some challenges, both on the customer side and then the ESD side. Why second chance hiring is important. I know many of you know this, but I'm just going to kind of drop in some maybe benefits or some additional nuggets. Talk a little bit about my favorite topic when working with this justice impacted population, which is skills discovery. And then finally, coaching folks to tell their story. And I know that you folks have a letter or an elevator speech that you encourage people to have. I'm just going to talk to you about the way that I think about it. So I would like to start with my goals when I go with this. And my first goal today, Seth, thank you, is to teach you absolutely nothing. Here's the reason why I say that. There's a lot of super smart people on their own. There's folks here that care about and work with these populations and these customers every single day. And so first of all, I want to thank you for doing that. You represent your organizations well, you help the customers to the best of your ability, and I appreciate you doing that. So it'd be very egotistical, not that I'm above ego, mind you, it'd be very egotistical for me to think I'm going to stand up here and just teach you a bunch of stuff that you don't know. Maybe what I'm going to do today is remind you of some things that you haven't thought about in a bit, but my ultimate goal is to do three things. Number one, I want to make you smile at some point. I'd also like for you to nod your head because you think I said something smart. And then finally, I want you to just walk out of here thinking differently about just one thing. And if I've done that, I will have achieved all my goals. Next slide, please. All right, so there's some similarities between the military and incarceration. I had some fun looking this up online. I saw some videos on TikTok. So the first thing, go ahead, Seth, please. Thank you. First one. You are government property. Congratulations. You've made it. Okay, next. The food isn't really good, usually. Everybody's got a nickname. Okay, who's got a nickname they're willing to share in here? What was it?
Cruiser.
Cruiser. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Cue ball.
Cue ball. Were you bald at the time?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Saying your nickname was Cue Ball.
No, it could have been. Believe me, I'm jealous of your hairline now. I'm not gonna lie. Next one, please. Everybody's got a story. So everybody's got a story about how they ended up there. I'm here because my grandfather was here, my father was here, and now I'm here. And that could go for the military or prison, unfortunately, right? That pipeline, that family history, and that lineage. Next. When you're in, you're in. You got to do your time. Right? Unless something extraordinary happens in both cases, once you are in that system, you got to get through your time just like everybody else does. Next. Trauma, unfortunately. So when you're in the military, quite often, many of us suffer trauma. When you're in a prison facility, often you suffer trauma which got you there. Then you are further traumatized when you're in the facility, and then you again get traumatized just like folks in the military do. Once you leave the military, once you leave a prison institution, you get traumatized again coming back to the community in many cases. And then finally, something that was brought up earlier, there's a lack of quality physical and mental health care. Obviously, veteran suicide is a huge issue because of a lack of quality mental health care to address those needs. It is also a big issue amongst the population of folks who are released from prison facilities and return to the community. Thank you. All right, next, let's go. So I'll give you a little bit of my story. So sometimes people will ask me, next slide please, Seth. Sometimes people will ask me, how did you end up doing what you're doing? What's your story? I'm gonna give it to you in a capsule form. So my story starts back in 2007 when the song on the top of the charts was Irreplaceable by Beyonce. To the left, right? I'm not going to sing that one, it's too high. Okay. And I was actually a pretty successful salesperson for a division of a Fortune 50 company. Nationally recognized, top 10% of salespeople, doing really, really well. But I also had a pretty dark secret. I was living as two people, because by day I was this professional person walking through nice offices talking to nice people. But by night I was an alcoholic and a crack cocaine addict. And I'll tell you, if you think it's tiring at the end of a week living as one person, living as two people that you hate is exhausting. And my life kind of continued to deteriorate over the next few years, and I started to experience some things. In 2014, I found myself homeless on the streets of Seattle, literally with all my possessions in a backpack on my back. And I was addicted to meth, completely unemployable, still an alcoholic, and I started to experience some things, like getting arrested and convicted multiple times and going to jail. Like surviving suicide attempts, like being committed to a mental health institution because of a psychotic break because of meth use. So I've experienced a lot of things that many of your customers face, and I know other people in this room have experienced some of those things too, right? Which is quite often why so many of us find our way to this work. Luckily for me, in 2016, I finally got the courage to walk into a room and say, "Hi there, my name's Ty. I'm an alcoholic and an addict." And they said, "Well, that's great, sir, but this is AAA, it's not AA." And I said, "I know, I'm just explaining to you why my car's in the lake." Right? But seriously, I got sober in 2016 and was lucky enough to stay sober-ish. I had some setbacks, I had some relapses, much in the same way that many of our customers have setbacks and relapses. But the thing that kept me on that right path was having community. And community can show up in a bunch of different ways. It can be for a guy like me who's in a 12-step program. Community can be that case manager or that employment navigator who's working with you directly and tells you that they believe in you. And they're there as that steady hand to help you stay on that new path. It can be family, it can be church, it can be a lot of different things. But I just want to make sure that I point out there's a very, very important role that every person in this room plays in helping people stay on that new positive path. And we all know many of the challenges that our populations face. Your population faces lots of challenges. You've got military trauma. You've got possibly being incarcerated in the system. You've got trying to come back from both of those conditions and rebuild a life that looks whatever normal looks like. Normal's all relative, right? But we often deal with folks that have lived some things that are not that normal by everyday standards. Next step, thank you. So in 2020, I started a little nonprofit called Recovery Career Services, and what I do in that is I offer career coaching and employment guidance to folks who are coming out of the criminal justice system and are also previously homeless and previously addicted. I also get the opportunity to stand in a bunch of rooms across the country and talk to HR managers and businesses about the importance of second chance hiring and creating recovery-friendly workplaces, because those things are often linked. Next, please. And my professional journey, so my first job that I got in sobriety in 2016 was part-time as a janitor, making $12 an hour because of the criminal convictions that I had. It was the only job I was able to get. From that job, I eventually moved back into a sales position, and then I found my way to Workforce and Homish in 2020, working for one of the absolute worst bosses in the world. He's sitting in the room right now. Hey, Ish. Actually, I had a great experience at Workforce and Homish. I had the opportunity to build the business engagement team there, and one of the things we always asked every single employer that we interacted with was, are you willing to offer employment opportunities to folks who have previous criminal justice involvement? Because of that, we're able to build a network of about 35 employers in Snohomish County that said that they would offer those employment opportunities in various forms. Is there one more bullet here?
Nope.
There's not. Thank you. We'll go to the next one. And I've been with ESD since March of this year, and love what I'm doing right now. Feel very fortunate to be here. Also, so let me talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've had at ESD and Reentry job seekers. So when I started in March of this year, the first thing I did was kind of a listening tour. So I talked to a bunch of people in the Department of Corrections. I talked to a bunch of people within the ESD and workforce system. And there's some challenges that we picked out that we're working to address as we build a new system to bring these services back into Department of Corrections facilities. So I just want to touch briefly on what we're gonna do and what you're likely to see. So the first challenge is that no dedicated reentry staff. Anybody here working on reentry initiatives in your office and you're stretched a little thin? Right. Well, we hope to get you some help with that. So first of all, thank you for your efforts, because this is the thing that I observe about working with these kind of populations, both veteran populations. There's another similarity, and justice impacted people, it is such heartwarming work. Man, we help somebody get that job, when you help somebody turn their lives around, when you see them achieve a goal that they have, it is the greatest feeling in the world. And it's also incredibly heartbreaking work. Right? Because sometimes people fall off the path. Despite our best efforts, sometimes people fall off the path. But it's those wins that keep us coming back. So keep striving for the win. So having dedicated reentry staff, what we're looking to do is have dedicated reentry folks in a number of areas. So number one, dedicated reentry employment specialists who will spend about half their time in facilities, so in DOC facilities, and then the other half of the time in work source offices or working from home. We're going to get dedicated, a small group of dedicated business engagement staff that will work with current business solutions or business services people to specifically focus on those employers who are going to offer second chances. And then we're also going to have some resource and system navigators. And so basically the people in a particular area that know all the housing, transportation, clothing, mental health, family reunification services and providers so that they can make the appropriate referrals. Next. So there's actually some really great efforts going on around the state. And so this reminds me of the program that Seth and crews that you guys have with JVSG, right? Where you're working directly with the DOC to identify incarcerated individuals who are veterans and make sure that they have a continuum of service, right? That's a great effort, and there's other efforts like that happening around the state. The problem, though, is that they're not necessarily sustainable in the sense that we don't have an MOU for them with the DOC. Quite often what happens is somebody in ESD has a great idea and says, I wonder if we can do this. And they call somebody in DOC and somebody says, yeah, we can do that. But there's nothing in writing. Right. And so then what ultimately happens is, the person at ESD retires, they move on, whatever. Same thing happens at DOC, and now those personalities that built that program are not there, so it's not sustainable. So we don't want to come into areas and dictate, you should do this, you should do that. We want to take the areas where they're already making great, they have great initiatives in place, and put them on paper. So if something happens, that still exists, and the next people that come in can just kind of pick it right up and continue to deliver services. Next, we have no current consistent system statewide. We have no idea from one office to another, if they have enough capacity to do reentry services, and B, if they're doing them, kind of what does it look like? Are they teaching classes? Are they just dropping off flyers? How are they actually making it work? Next. So we don't have any pool of subject matter experts, really. So I'm certainly happy to travel to all the regions in the state and talk to employers and talk to groups like this about reentry. But really what we need are a pool of people that can do what I do. And we're gonna, at some point, train up a pool of people who can do that, because it's really important in every community that we can talk to businesses about why they should do this. It's also important, one of the other things we're doing right now is we're having a couple of state agency reentry hiring events that are coming up, because we've determined that in Washington State, if we're gonna talk to private employers and say, you need to hire from this population, we should be putting our money where our mouth is. Right. So we've got two events, September 26th, down in Thurston County, Olympia. There's going to be 10 state agencies and some local resources as well. And then tentatively November 20th here in Spokane. We have 6 state agencies signed up already, and we're going to be working to get the word out to the justice impacted job seeker community.
September 19th. We got about 10 committed rehire, reentries, and we got a whole bunch of resources coming.
Awesome. Can you send me a flyer for that? And I'll get it out.
Sorry.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Awesome. That's Keith Trumbo from Everett WorkSource, for those of you who don't know. Thank you, Keith. Is there one more bullet? There is. We also have a lack of reentry training for business solutions and engagement staff. So it is as someone who comes from business engagement, I can tell you that engaging a business about hiring justice impacted individuals is way different than just talking to them about paid internships or transitional jobs. It's a way different beast. And we don't have adequate training in place yet. We are working on that. I think that's the last one. Okay. So the reentry customer, I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna throw this out. So what do we think, what are the challenges for the reentry customer? And we'll raise your hand, yell them out. Go ahead, Cruz.
I think the one thing that I'm seeing a lot is that even though they did 5 years, 6 years, 9 months, whatever it is, when they still get out, they are still labeled and still dealing with that, even though they did their time. Whatever it was bad, I understand that. But when employers see them, employment specialists see them, managers see them, they see them as, you messed up for the rest of your life, and no matter what it is, I'm going to see you as that. So it's hard for them to try to move forward knowing that they did the time, that why even go to jail.
Yeah, stigma, right? So that actually, yes?
One of the biggest things is when you're leaving the prisons, leaving the work releases, leaving everything, they have no social security card and no driver's license. That is a big thing. That is. Now,
hopefully the ID, there was actually a bill that was passed to make sure that people leave with ID. I don't know if it's been fully rolled out in every prison facility yet, but there is legislation in place, right? But those are both excellent points. Now, the social security card, I hear, continues to still be an issue. That's what I'm hearing. I think there is some work. Yes, sir. I think there's some work behind the scenes to fix that. Go ahead.
Yeah, coming out along with trying to rebuild their lives, get jobs and whatnot. There's sometimes a lot of conditions that they have to go through. So trying to manage their time with treatment, with education, and other things.
Yeah. Anybody here ever been through a reentry simulation? Wow, not many of you. Ooh. Ooh. Yeah, so I'm going to come to you folks in just a second. So a reentry simulation is exactly what it sounds like. It gives you an opportunity to go through what a month of being someone who's recently released from incarceration or has a criminal record, what they go through and the challenges they see. And it is eye-opening and sad because of the system we put together. Yes, here and then here.
Recidivism.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Reoffending, temptation, all the things that are tied with that, you know, and then recreating yourself in a system that is working against you.
Yeah, and I heard a statistic recently. I think something like a third of all people who go back is because of actually parole violations. So they actually didn't do anything wrong. They got violated, and it's very easy to get violated. Yes, I'll come right back to you, Cruz. Yes.
How do they answer a background check? I just had one the other day. He's going, I mean, I'm on the phone and he's going, ooh, it's asking for a felony. There's no parameter. How do I answer that? I mean, he's panicked. And I said, tell the truth. Just tell the truth.
Yeah, tell the truth, but be strategic about that.
Yeah, but I mean, we had a lot of conversation about that. You know, what do I do? And as an HR professional, you know, they can't go back over 10 years, you know. Mm-hmm. And you have all this, but there's that stigma that plays into that through the HR community, and they're going, I don't want to deal with that. But they're really not supposed to make that decision solely on that.
But we know they do.
Absolutely they do.
Let's tell the truth. I'm going to go Keith and then Cruz. Keith.
Place to live.
Yeah. Housing. Actually, I'm going to come back to you, Cruz. There's one more that I haven't talked to you yet. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just trying to piggyback on what she said. And you know, when the employers look back into their history, if whosoever is doing it is supposed to only follow by the rules in which felonies, class of felonies, and how long those stay on their record. Because to my understanding, it's either 7 years or 10 years, those should fall off.
Yeah, and so that's actually really interesting. I'm going to address that in just a second. Cruz, you've been very patient. I'm going to come to you. Go ahead.
And that's what I was going to say. I don't know how to say it, but I'm going to say like resources that are providers, service providers, resources, biases. Like there are some people who don't want to work with murderers. People don't want to work with sex offenders. So sometimes I get a call and be like, hey, can you come help this guy? I'm like, what's wrong with him? He's a sex offender and I don't want to deal with him. I'm like, well, you're an employee specialist. You should. No, I don't want you. Can you deal with them? I just don't want you. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk. I don't care. But because of that happens, it's a challenge for them because they did their time. They want to move forward. When people see them, you're a murderer, you're a drug dealer, you're a child molester. I don't want to help you. You did something real bad in life. Just get out of here. I don't care that you're homeless, you're on drugs, you're hurting. You did something bad. I don't want to help you. And that is a challenge that a lot of reentry customers face because they are just trying to fix their lives and get back together. But
stigma is real, and stigma even amongst those of us sometimes who, because let's face it, there's going to be people that work in our ranks who have histories that make it difficult for them to kind of interact with some of these customers, right? So it's important to be aware of that. Yes?
So I was just going to share, I feel like a lot of folks don't understand how intense or how severe some of these barriers are that individuals face. And everybody's journey is a little bit different. It could be based on how long an individual is down. Think of how long or how far technology will come in even 5 years. And you come out and you went from a paper copy application to now they're like, sit down on this machine. They're like, I don't even know how to work this. Or the bus system has changed. Or they've lost their driver's license and they get put at a transitional house and it's not even near a bus line that can get them transportation because they don't know where they're going. Inside the prisons, they don't have access to technology. You send in a resource and that document's going to get printed for the next 15 years. That individual's like, I'm going to go here for this resource, and that resource is not available. So these folks are coming out with maybe, you know, up until recently, they only had $40 gate money in a good luck plan. Right. We recently upped that to $300, but even at that, that's not a lot when you think of, you know, maybe I'm releasing on a Friday afternoon and I'm being transported from Walla Walla over to western side of the state and I don't get off that bus till 10 o'clock at night. Where am I going to go for my meal? How how do I get off this bus and get to that transitional house? Are they gonna give me bedding? Some of, are they gonna provide my meals so I can get to DSHS on Monday? Some of these folks have lost community connections,
Yeah.
have families or children, that they're figuring out who's been parented by somebody else. So they've got lots of challenges.
They do, and I think, so I saw a gentleman in the back that had his hand up a little while ago, and then this young lady right here. So I'm gonna take 2 rounds for this. It is, I think one thing that many of us that are sitting in this room might take for granted often is a network, and like how powerful it really is to just be able to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, I need a ride, I need a couch to surf on, I need help finding a job. It is really difficult. Sir, go ahead.
Reacclimation to civilian populace, and this is one that's, both military or, for incarceration.
Yeah.
Just talking to normal people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're talking about changing mindset after you've been indoctrinated in a way of life for a period of time, and sometimes you've been on high alert for a long time too, right? And so just being a regular everyday person in line for pizza at Costco can be triggering. Let's face it, it can. Yes?
Job history, like they may have learned many job skills while in prison or in the military, but those aren't necessarily going to transfer onto a resume in the same way as civilian population.
Absolutely true. I'm so glad you said that, because that gets back to that skills thing that I love so much. So I'm gonna talk, this gentleman back here mentioned, go ahead, one more, Cruzy.
So for our tribal veteran brothers and sisters, it's a double-edged sword, their resources are closed within the tribes because of their conviction or whatever, it's kind of in their reaction, so to say, and then also on the outside. So a lot of heavy advocating and searching for what resources are open for them.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, I can't take one more, I'm so sorry. All right, so I just want to thank everybody for all your contributions. I think you actually, let's go ahead and just fly through my list. I think everybody got the stuff. So uncertainty and fear, I think that kind of gets to that, being a regular citizen again, right? What is that going to be like? I've been in this institution for 5 or 10 years. I have no idea what life is like out there. So it gets back to what this young lady was saying too, right? So there's some fear there. There is patience. So how many of you have ever run into customers who say, oh my God, I wasted so much time, I just want to get my life started and get everything on track, right? I could totally relate to that, right? Sometimes preaching them patience, like, no, it would actually make sense for you to just take this right now job for like 6 months and get your feet underneath you, and then that's going to set the foundation for success. Relapse. Now, I don't just mean relapse from drugs and alcohol. I mean relapse like going back to criminal activity. I'll tell you, the first year I was sober, it was 50-50 every day whether I was going to go back to the streets to make fast money or if I was going to keep on this path. Because some days recovery stinks. It does. And so early on, that can be a real challenge. Accepting help. I always think accepting help is a 2-part thing. You got to ask for help, and then you got to accept the help that is given, even if it doesn't look like what you want it to look like. So somebody comes to you and they say, I'm having housing problems. I need money I want you to pay my rent this month. But instead, the solution you offer is you call their landlord and negotiate with the landlord so they can actually pay that later. Yeah. That's not what they wanted, but it is a solution. They got to be willing to accept that, right? And then finally, navigating the system. Right? Yeah, that's the exact reaction I had. It's siloed. In a lot of ways, I think it's siloed simply because of the way that agencies and nonprofits compete for money. Everybody's got outcomes to hit. Everybody's got numbers they got to demonstrate to show their effectiveness. So as a result, people hoard resources. They don't want to share. They don't want to blend the system. I understand why. It's just not great. Next, please. All right, so why second chance hiring is important. I think I've only got 3 of these. So 95% of folks in facilities are going to return to the community at some point. It's a fact. We have DOC releases about 30,000 citizens back into the communities across the state per year. So most of these folks are coming back. How do you want them to come back? Do we want them to come back with, this is the argument that I often make to employers. How do you want them to come back? Do you want them to show up to your business every day, collecting a paycheck, doing good work, contributing, paying taxes? Or you want them showing up at your house to get your stereo? Real simple, right? Next. Decreased rates of recidivism. So I was actually Ish and I were part of a governor's panel a few months ago. I was actually surprised to hear that compared to the rest of the nation, Washington State is fairly low in recidivism, 22%, which is actually not a bad number, right? Because there's some other places that are up around 50, but we still obviously want to work to get that lower. Next, taxpayer savings. So it costs in Washington State about $45,000 to $48,000 a year to house somebody in a facility, when they could be out in the community, contributing to the tax base, and making our communities better places. And next, it really is an overlooked source of talent. I've heard people refer to this pool of folks in a bunch of different ways. The waiting workforce, I've heard. Overlooked and untapped, I've heard. There's about 77 million people in the US that have criminal convictions. Adults that have criminal convictions. About a third, that's more people than actually have bachelor's degrees. And in Washington State, there's about 2.2 million adults that have criminal convictions. And most of those folks, I think 80-ish%, have no current involvement with the criminal justice system. So not on paper, not actually in a facility somewhere. These are people that are just walking around with these criminal records and they're being dragged down by them. Now, I'm gonna get back to the thing that you mentioned about businesses not doing the right thing and not having the policies, right? So the problem in this particular area, so we had the Fair Chance in Hiring Act that passed in 2018, so ban the box. The problem with how employers actually behave when they evaluate candidates is that it's not a law, there's guidance. There was guidance that was passed in 2012 by the EEOC that said that when employers are evaluating job seekers that have criminal convictions, they should look at 3 areas. Number 1, the nature of the crime. Number 2, how long ago that crime occurred. And number 3, the nature of the job for which they are applying. But it's only guidance, which basically says that employers get to make up their own rules. And we all know what happens when somebody goes for an interview. I was in the interview, it went pretty well. They decided they were thinking about making an offer, but they said all they had to do was run the background check. And when they ran the background check, the entire tenor of the conversation changed. We weren't talking about that funny thing I said in the interview or how well I was going to fit in the company. Now we're talking about who I used to be, not who I am today. Because employers still have that latitude to kind of make decisions that way. Now, Civil Survival is actually working on a bill to make it much tougher for employers to do that, but that's not likely to actually hit the legislature for another couple years. But there are people talking about these things. Next. Okay, this is my very favoriteest topic. All right, so I have the opportunity, sorry, I'm not actually checking TikTok. I am getting to some notes that I have here. So I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of different folks about their skills. And one of the best salespeople that I've ever met is somebody who I will term as a formerly community-based independent freelance pharmaceutical distributor. Okay? All right. So, and because of what he used to do, so he had a lot of skills that he developed to survive that life that he was in before. He's got some communication skills, he's got some negotiation skills, he's got some customer service skills, probably got some math skills. Yeah, he knows what an 8 is, I tell you that. All right? He's probably got some inventory skills, if you know what I mean, right? Logistics skills, flexible, creative, good with ambiguity. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff, right?
Supply chain management.
Supply chain, that's right. Collections, probably. And you know, the reason why I bring all this stuff up is because so often when we have customers that are coming in as they're beginning these journeys, they feel horribly about themselves. What do I have to offer an employer? I've never worked a job in my life, or I've had really crappy job history. And it's hard for them to envision skills that they might already have that might be really useful for an employer, right? And so this is a slightly different way of thinking about the skills that they bring. But especially if you're doing a functional resume for somebody, these are skills you can list right in the top. And then it's just up to us to coach them how to talk about them successfully. Now, so I'm going to, in the same vein as that freelance pharmaceutical distributor, I'm going to name a couple of job titles, and I want you to tell me, what do you think this person was doing in their previous life? Inventory relocation specialist.
Auto.
What'd you say?
Auto.
We got one of those coming. Shoplifter. Oh yeah. Moving that inventory from one spot to another, from the counter to their pocket. Inventory management, attention to detail, risk assessment are skills that they have. Strategic planning and quick decision making. So these are all skills they have, right? Let's see. Who's a data access specialist? Yeah, hacker. IT skills, problem solving and analytical thinking, cybersecurity awareness and technical proficiency. We're going to take one more of these. A logistics and distribution manager. What was that? Dealer. Maybe.
He's a supplier.
Let's say automobile logistics and distribution manager. Car thief, chop shop maybe. Logistics, supply chain management, mechanical skills, project management, and resourcefulness. So in all these things that people were doing to live their previous lives, when I was out there drug dealing, a little bit of drug dealing, mainly cover my habit, but stealing stuff, lying to people, I developed a bunch of skills, right? Negotiation, persuasion. Marketing, yeah, marketing. There's a bunch of skills that if we just take the time to sit with our folks and have them think through what they experienced and help them translate that to a resume, that those functional resumes, which in many cases we're going to use with this population, right, are going to look a lot better. Next. So survival skills are transferable skills. I think I might have spelled transferable wrong. Can definitely be a positive benefit for employers. And what's next? Functional resume. Wow, it's like I wrote this myself. And we just did a quick exercise. All right, next. All right, so let's get back to telling their story. And Cruz, I think you, and Seth, I think you sent me a note about this. Like, what do we call it in ESD when it comes to like the letter of explanation or telling their story?
The incarceration speech.
The incarceration speech, thank you. All right, everybody, I'm going to guess most people in here are familiar with this, right? Okay, so when I work direct, I'm just going to give you kind of what I do when I work with coaching clients and what I advise folks to do. So I think there's always 3 parts to telling their story. So the first thing that I always encourage people to do, and I know you need to encourage folks to do this too, is it gets back to what you said. Always tell the truth, but be strategic about what you tell and when you tell it. One of the wonderful things about working with this population is once people really decide to turn their lives around, they just want to be honest about everything. One of the worst things about working with this population is that when they decide to turn their lives around, they want to be honest about everything. So they'll walk into an interview and they will just verbally vomit all over the interview and give them their entire life story before they even ask them a question about the job. And we obviously want to avoid that, right? Because that's going to limit the ability that they have to actually, ooh boy, I hope that link works. Can you try that link? Well, I know the link's going to work. I hope the sound works.
Job interviews can be intimidating for anyone, even more so if you have a criminal record.
Hold on a second,
folks. You have to deal with the feeling of being judged, the possibility of your record affecting your chances, and more. In this video, we'll go over certain steps you can take to improve your chances of nailing your interview, including what to say about your record and how to bring it up. Going into an interview, it's good to have an elevator speech prepared. This is basically a 30-second speech talking about your record and your experience.
We'll get these links out to you.
You should mention what your charge
was. It's like a 2-minute video on a very good 2-minute YouTube video that kind of walks people through how to tell that story, right? The way that I recommend it is that they have this this incarceration letter, right? This letter of explanation, as I call it, that talks about 3 things. So number 1, at a very, very high level, what happened? No details, no cracking jokes about selling crack, none of that. Very high level. Second, what are the new positive things that they're doing in their lives in order to walk the right path? Third, what can they do for the employer? Because employers don't post jobs online because the employer's just trying to be nice. They post jobs because they have a need. So how do you bring it back? There you go. What happened? What's different? Sell yourself. I'll give you an example of this. So in the letter of explanation that I used, and this is not long, this is like 3 paragraphs, maybe half page tops. Letter of explanation I used. First paragraph. From 2014 to 2016, I was homeless on the streets of Seattle and living with an addiction. It was during this time that all of my criminal convictions occurred. I take full responsibility for what happened, and I've now set myself on a new path. So, high level, what happened, why it happened, taking responsibility, make the pivot. For the last year, I've been in recovery and have worked with a sponsor, built new relationships with my friends and family, volunteered at a food bank, taken job training, and worked a job. So by any measure, it's clear that I'm trying to be a different person now than I was back then. Because trust me, somebody who's smoking meth all the time ain't trying to do that. Okay? Third paragraph. I'm sorry, yes, third paragraph. So super short, just 2 paragraphs so far. Third paragraph. I'm sure if given the opportunity to work for your company because of my communication skills, negotiation skills, sales skills, that I could be a great employee. Period. Super simple, right? So they write the letter based on whatever's true for them. Then they rehearse it in the mirror with their friends, with you, so that when they're in the interview, they can actually kind of talk about it and not look like they're grasping for it or making things up. Okay? Now, when would you say the best time for them to actually present this letter of explanation might be, or to have this verbal explanation? When would it be?
In the interview.
Interview. Okay, when?
Tell me something about
If they ask, I mean, because don't just show up information that's not asked.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's, those are actually all good answers. Here's, Cruz, you got something to add?
I agree with you, but I've been in situations where if you don't tell them, the veteran my veterans get excited. Hey, it was good. They didn't ask any questions about my background. I think I have a shot. And I'm like, dude, I know that employer. They're not gonna, you should have told them because they didn't do a background check. No, look, man, they didn't ask. I didn't say anything. I got a shot, and then they find out they do a background check, and they're like, oh man, they won't get hired. I know. So I'm kind of in between. There are times you should tell them if they don't ask, and of course there are times you should tell them if they don't ask. But that's gonna be based on how the interview is going, and you're gonna know when you get into that interview if there's gonna be, it's gonna start off good or start off bad.
Yeah, let me make a suggestion about this. So, and thanks everybody. Those are, I completely understand those answers. They make sense. So here's what I typically recommend. Number one, if they can find out before the interview if they're gonna be a background check, great. If they can't, I totally understand it. I typically recommend that folks, they offer this explanation or ready to present it at the end of the interview before the background check. So whether it's a first interview or second interview. And if you don't know if they're gonna run a background check, there's a very simple question that they can ask. What does the rest of the hiring process look like? Right? Because at that point, the HR person, hiring manager, whoever, is gonna either say, we gotta run a background check, we gotta do a drug test, whatever, or if they don't tell you that, there's a good chance they're not gonna run the background check. The reason why it's important for them to ask it there is for the reason that other folks kind of talked about. You don't wanna present it up front and ruin any opportunity you might have just in case they're not gonna run it. But if you ask that question, then present it then, you get to take credit for being honest, right? And there's no surprises. Now, this letter of explanation or this elevator speech will work at that point. That's not to say that once the background actually gets pulled, that the employer's not gonna ask more questions and ask for more explanation. But at this point, this kind of high-level overview is sufficient. And again, the reason why I like it is because it gives the person the chance to control the narrative, right? So we think about my case. If I hadn't said anything to the employer about the fact that I was addicted and on the streets and this is why all the criminal convictions happened, they would have pulled my background and seen like 8 criminal convictions in 2 years, like, whoa, what happened? But because I got ahead of the story and I controlled that narrative, which is what our customers should do, it was looked at more favorably. Does that kind of make sense? Yes. Yeah, you know, that is really, so that's good. And that's also really good if somebody has crimes that are over 10 years old. I think somebody else talked about like 7 or 10 years, but they're Googleable. So if they have a conviction that is Googleable and you can find their name, then they need to be prepared to get ahead of that. As a matter of fact, I would encourage them to get ahead of that, right? And in some companies, so in the Employment Security Department, just so you folks know, we don't, if it's not related to money, we don't run background checks, we don't do Google searches. So some of it is also dependent upon the environment of the company, right? The culture of the company. So that gets back to that, trying to figure out before, do they have former employees you can talk to? Can you go to Glassdoor and see what other people have said about being there in the hiring process. Yes, go ahead.
Working for that with veterans that don't have a conviction, but were maybe removed from command or things like that, and they're like unhireable, like because of the Navy Times article or whatever. Do you have any advice for that? Is there a way to clean up your people?
Yeah, well, I think that the way to clean it up is they're prepared to address it, right? It gets back to coaching them about how to talk about it, because let's face it, with all the tips in the world, the thing that we absolutely cannot account for are the stigma that people are going to face when they're with the hiring manager or with a company, and the policies that that company kind of has in place, right? What I try to do with the people that I coach and work with face to face is just say, this is probably going to be a little tougher than it would be for somebody who's never had a criminal conviction, but it's not impossible. It absolutely is not impossible. So it really is, as you folks know, when it comes to supporting folks, you got to be there with them through the triumphs and the downs too. Yes.
I'll back up to the Social Security question for you.
Yeah.
I had a real good contract, so I texted them. As long as that new ID they're getting when they're released has their name, their date of birth, and their picture, they can take that into Social Security, and they made it a lot easier. They can get a new card.
Nice. So I'm going to put one caveat on that, because I'm pretty sure that you can't have had more than like 5 or 10 Social Security cards issued. Is it 6? 10. So 10. You can't have more than 10 have been issued to you. So if they're on number 11, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
So that's the one caveat I'll put on it. But thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Yes, comments?
I want to relate.
Let's do this. Come on, let's do it. Come on, man.
Where we said there was a stigma of employers saying that, oh, I don't want to work with a sex offender. And the question is, isn't that a personal, confidential information that other employers should know?
Yeah, the employees shouldn't know that.
Yeah.
But let's be honest.
So how did that get out?
Let's be honest. So if it's a really big company, then they probably have very strict guidelines in place about information not making it out of HR. But if it's a company like 30 people where everybody knows everybody's business, it's probably gonna get out. I mean, so not only do we have to worry about it getting out of HR, but we also need to coach our customer. You probably shouldn't reveal a lot about your background to your coworkers, because that might, I hate that we have to do that. But that's probably good practice for us.
And real quick, wouldn't that be like some kind of lawsuit? Like legit, you know what I'm saying?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, but I got a story based on that. I had a aircraft mechanic, did I want to say 8 years in the Navy, knows planes, mechanics and everything, went to work for an aerospace company, nailed it. He was a level 2 sex offender. Got the job, got the experience. It was 10 years ago, everything was fine. Met a coworker, said his name. My name is John Smith. Oh, really? Coworker went to the internet, Googled him, saw him on the page, went to HR and says, you know what? I can't work here anymore because of this person you just hired. So HR was like, fine. I have 10 to 15 people who are upset. I hired a sex offender, so I'm gonna get rid of that sex offender. And like 2 months later, he lost his job. So he was able to do the job.
Yep.
He had knowledge of the job, but because of word getting out and the internet, it happened. So, yeah, is there a way to fix it? The internet's forever. Once it's on the internet,
The internet is forever.
Yeah, and that's why it's always good to be upfront, because I would rather go into a place saying, hey, this is me, yes or no, rather than go back and be like, I hope, what if, and then get turned down. I'd rather let you know this is who I am, this is what I am.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Or even worse, you get hired and then you get that tap on the shoulder 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I'm doing good. My life's together. I got a chance.
Yeah.
Okay, time to go back.
One more. Go ahead.
The other piece about sex offenders I was going to mention earlier, I'm a nurse, and I don't know how many people know that when they come to needing skilled nursing home placement, it's impossible because they must do a check. And when they come up in the system, they can't be placed in a nursing home. I don't know if there's any work being done around that, but I mean, I'm talking veterans or people that cannot be dangerous, can't move on their own, and cannot be placed in a safe nursing home.
There's a I recently had the opportunity to go out to McNeil Island and talk to the folks that are there, and they have some incredible challenges. incredible challenges, and unfortunately that is one of them. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to thank everybody. One more, yes.
Just one more.
Yeah.
Just to come off of what you said, you can do what's called exception to the rule. So let's say that you have a sex offender, the mom wants that sex offender to take care of them. They actually can have that sex offender take care of her mother, and that's called an exception to the rule, and I've done it many times.
That is a good tip. Thank you. Thank you for getting that last comment in. I appreciate it. All right, I got a final thought, and then we're gonna give you some of your time back. So, one of the earliest lessons. So you're gonna get an opportunity now to look at a picture of me being really cute as a kid. Go ahead, Seth. Boom! Look at that. All right. That's me, 1973. I'm one year old. Don't do the math on how old I am now. I'm in Covington, Tennessee, which is a little town outside of Memphis, Tennessee, where my dad and my mom and I were all born. And one of the earliest lessons I learned about second chances came from my dad. Now, I lived all around the South before I ended up in Washington State back in '86. But when I was about 6 years old, we were living in a town called Albany, Georgia. It's about 2.5 hours outside of Atlanta. And my dad, in the fall of 1978, brought home this car. Woo! Nice. Woo! Now I gotta give you the story about my dad. My dad is the oldest of 11 kids. He's the one kid who got out. Dirt poor, did not have running water in the house until he was 11, didn't have electricity until he was 13. First one to go to college, first one to graduate, first one to leave that small town. And he took a series of kind of corporate jobs. He was a corporate ladder climber. And when he bought this car in 1978, it wasn't the sign that he had already made it. But at that point, he'd already made it further than anybody in his family had. It was clear that he was going places. And I remember my dad just loving that car, washing it 2 or 3 times a week out in the driveway. And it was his baby. It was his darling. Now, this is the 70s, and so some things started to develop over the next few months with my dad and I. We had a close relationship. So anybody ever have a parent that would let you like sit on their lap and steer the car? Okay, yeah, don't judge my dad, it was the 70s. And eventually, it got to the point where he'd let me work the gas pedals, right? Gas and brake. And so one of the things my dad and I used to like to do together was go to the local Piggly Wiggly and pick up some, anybody from the South remember Piggly Wiggly? All right. We go to the local Piggly Wiggly, just not for like big shopping trips, for little stuff, like bread and butter and milk and stuff like that. So one night, we're coming back from the grocery store, and I'm on my dad's lap, I'm steering, I'm working the pedals, and we go to make that last right turn to get into our neighborhood, and I mix up the gas and the brake. Instead of hitting the brake, I hit the gas. We shoot across the intersection. I put the car in a ditch in about 10 inches of water, and I am just overwhelmed and terrified, right? Because I was thinking about how much I disappointed my dad. Now, by the way, when I put that car in the ditch, all the groceries that were in the back seat flew out of the back seat and crashed into the front windshield, including the milk, which exploded, by the way, and went everywhere. And when I would inherit that car 10 years later as my first vehicle, in the summers, it still smelled kind of milky. Okay? So I'm in the front seat. My dad actually kind of grabbed me to make sure I didn't get hit on the steering wheel. Neighbors come out of their house. They call the tow truck. Tow truck comes up. I'm just sitting on the side of the road, and I am just crying my eyes out, scared and worried about how much I disappointed my dad. Tow truck leaves. Luckily, there wasn't a ton of damage to the car. We get back in the car, and I'm just kind of huddled against the passenger side door crying, and my dad puts his hand on my shoulder. He says, well, you know you got to get us the rest of the way home now, right? He pulls me over onto his lap, and I steer the car the rest of the way home. We get in the driveway. He gives me a big hug from behind, and he kisses me on the head and says, I love you. Nice job. Now, I had already punished the hell out of myself in here, but he decided that it probably wasn't a great thing to punish me again. And unfortunately, for a lot of our customers, that's what they face. They get punished twice. Sometimes that word of encouragement can really mean a lot. And so as we go about our jobs, and you folks that are so dedicated to what you're doing already, just think about what a difference in my life that moment made. Somebody reaching out to me to let me know that I still had value, and that I was cared about, and that I was worthy, really meant a ton to me in that moment. And that's the same difference that we get to make every day in the lives of these customers who are justice impacted. I want to thank you very, very much. I'm very easy to find. I don't know what that is. Oh, what is that? A survey? Okay, here's my You surprised me. Here's my information right here. If anybody here, you can take a picture of this. We'll make sure we get the slides out. But if anybody has any questions or anything, or you want to reach out about anything Reach related, feel free. And apparently there's a survey that's going to come up in a second. I think we got like 2 minutes. Does anybody have any questions? Wow, I did a great job. Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
I'll add, just waiting for the last photos to be taken. Since we missed that video on the timing, I wanted to share a couple examples of where timing came into play, because working with that justice-involved customer, and we've got the speech, we found the appropriate way to disclose and how to describe their skills and abilities, all within 30 seconds of meeting somebody. And one of my lessons, I said that the most effective way to use this is going to come out of the blue. You're never going to see it coming. And for one of my customers, I had just happenstance, I had a $5 gift card to McDonald's. Here, while you're looking for work, go get a meal or whatever, right? And as he's in the line at McDonald's, a person right in front of him sitting there talking about this problem he's having at work. And he says, Seth, the words came in my head. She says, it's going to be this odd moment where you're listening and you're going to find the right time to introduce yourself. And he introduced himself and his skills, and he got himself a job right there. Another customer of mine, a sex offender who was an HVAC specialist before he was incarcerated, was going to a housing solution facility to solve his housing because he was a sex offender, so it was very difficult to find housing for himself. And he noticed a contractor looking at a set of blueprints, HVAC blueprints. And he just said, hey, I know HVAC blueprints, what are you looking for? And he ended up solving a problem for this guy who had already hired 3 different HVAC companies, and they couldn't figure out how to solve it. And it was like this little switch that he just knew, because it was the HQ 5000 HVAC system he already knew about from 70 years ago or whatever, right? Got himself a job. Not only a job, but that developer was building housing specifically to house sex offenders. So not only did he get himself a job, he got himself housing, all solved on the same day. So it was the timing. We didn't get to watch that video, but educating our customers that the timing isn't going to be right at the interview. It could be outside the community. You never know when that timing part is going to come into play.
Yeah. Thank you, Seth. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
We work in North Seattle, works with North Seattle.
Yeah.
It's our proud grant, doing kicking butt. So